Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Happy 4th of July. And as you hear, well, you might hear behind me, fireworks are going to be going on, and who knows how much will be there tonight. But speaking of fireworks, there was a very interesting video placed out by the city council from Minneapolis to talk about defunding the police. And it had a lot of reaction, a lot of emotional reaction. There's an adage that when you throw out the baby with the bathwater, you get sometimes very unintended consequences. A lot of times we see a problem and we think the way to get rid of the problem is to get rid of the thing. Example, you go to the doctor because your arm's hurting you, and you say, "Doc, my arm is hurting me." And the doctor says, "Okay, we'll just take off your arm." I don't think many people would say, "Great, that's a great idea." There's no question there are problems in the police and policing force. And psychologically, we know that's correct. Philip Zimbardo, a Stanford professor, did an experiment many years ago and showing that once you give any people power over other people, they're going to be abuses of power. It's a psychological phenomenon, not something you can just get rid of, because once you give power to human beings, there's going to be abuses, which is true in politics, it's true in a judicial system, it's true in any system of power, that there'll be abuse that takes place. But the law of unintended consequences is that when you just say systematically we're going to get rid of that, we're going to have problems and other issues that you didn't think of or count on. So I want to break this down a little bit and have a little bit of a conversation about it. And sometimes, again, I don't have the answers on this one. Can't say to you, this is the best way to do things. But I think that fundamentally, the situation here has gone a little too far, causing what's going to be the law of unintended consequences. With that in mind, let's go.
Over policing is taking place, with Minneapolis leading the conversation, and it's just getting started.
Council members standing by their pledge to dismantle the police department entirely, but a lot of folks in Minneapolis want to know what that looks like. Fox 9's Maury Glover live in the city tonight. And Maury, you did get a little bit of clarification anyway.
Well, that's right. City council members didn't offer a lot of new details in their afternoon Zoom call with reporters. What they say, they still plan to go ahead with their plan to get rid of the Minneapolis Police Department in its current form.
Defund MPD!
As demonstrators marched through Minneapolis, calling on city leaders to defund the Minneapolis Police Department, some city council members said they were in lockstep with the protests. And a day later, they are not backing down.
We are entering into, as far as the country is concerned, uncharted territory, right? We haven't had this conversation since the very inception of police forces.
9 members of the city council say they support dismantling the Minneapolis Police Department and replacing it with a community-based public safety model. While they don't know what that will look like, they say over the next year, they'll ask the community to help them rebuild what they call a broken system from the ground up.
We're looking back 150 years. Hopefully it will not take us 150 years to rebuild that new system, but we know it won't happen overnight.
Some city council members say they hope to begin redirecting funds from MPD to expand established community-based safety programs like the city's Office of Violence Prevention as soon as the mayor submits his amended budget to the city council later this month.
I'm seeing a lot of reporters ask questions about, well, if there's a fatal drive-by shooting, what are you going to do? Or if this other thing happened, who would respond? The answer is we're going to come up with that solution together.
And while...
So again, right, we're coming up with an idea. We're going to do this first, and then we'll come up with the answer later. That's a great way of doing things. I think it's wonderful. You should always get rid of something before you have a solution to your problem, without studying what its ramifications are going to be or how many more people are going to die. Because we don't have to care about what the consequences are as long as we have good intentions.
It would be difficult to reach a consensus from the community on how to move forward. The council members say in their minds there's no going back.
At the end of this, we're gonna come out the other side of this with a city that is safer for everyone, not just for a few people at the expense of everyone.
Now, city council members say that other cities have had success with their Office of Violence Prevention, like Louisville and Milwaukee, but they say those are some of the models that they'll be looking at when they try to come up with Minneapolis's new system. Reporting live in Minneapolis, Maury Glover, Fox 9 News.
Well, those
The sad part is neither of those two places have gotten rid of police. They still have the police and they still have that. But I want you to see this is a very important aspect in understanding a mindset to when somebody's trying to change something for you in your life.
As a white person, I want to say to my white neighbors, if you're experiencing a fear or lack of safety for the first time, you're experiencing something that our neighbors of color live with every day. And I invite you to open your hearts and listen to our neighbors, to step back and center the voices of our communities that have been impacted by community violence and police violence in our efforts to move forward. And to examine your discomfort, to think with compassion what it has felt like to live with the fear that you may be feeling for the first time for your whole life, to fear for the lives of your children. That is my commitment, and I invite you all to join me in that work.
That is Lisa Bender, the head of the council that we just talked about, who is telling people that they, who should now be feeling fear for the first time, is a good thing. In working with the communities that I've worked in, who have lived in fear, more often than not, many of the fear they're living in is the fear of the violence in their neighborhood. Many years ago, I was working in EI, which is early intervention. And I would go to people's homes, 0 to 3-year-olds. And I remember meeting a young African-American mother, and I was meeting her in what was considered to be a project. And I went to the house, and she, we made the time and the date to come. She goes, by the way, please, you can't come in here after this time. I said, why not? It's not safe. I never go out after that time. And she lived like that every single day. And we talked about that. We talked about that feeling, what it felt like to have to be in by a specific time before it became too dangerous. I think the aspect here to believe that people of one type felt fear for the first time is not correct. Because what happens is that in any neighborhood where there's a higher amount of crime, there's going to be a higher amount of fear. Because that's the nature of the neighborhood. But Ms. Bender seems to denote that only certain people feel fear. The truth of the matter is, anytime there's crime anywhere, we feel fear. Nobody likes to have shootings next to them. Nobody wants to have, God forbid, their child shot because of unintended fire and their children get hit. Nobody wants violence. Nobody enjoys this. The aspect of believing that now you get to feel the fear is a good thing is not good. And it's sort of like this idea that we want everybody to be pushed down to feel the same exact things as everybody else, because then we'll have understanding. And it doesn't work that way. But I want you to listen to the next part, because it's the same person who's deciding this about the police and about a decision she's making and what its ramification would be.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police-free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege. That comes from a place of privilege. Now I want you to think about that for a minute. Does that have anything to do with privilege? The idea that I call the police because I'm trying to have a situation where my life is not going to be threatened or killed, and that's a place of privilege? Does she believe that only privileged people call the police? That people who are not low income don't use the police force? That people that are minorities don't use the police force? Only privileged people use the police force? As far as I know, the only people that are privileged that use force like that are people that have private security, which is not the majority of Americans. Very few of us have a private security force.
It's interesting is that a lot of these places that have talked about this have hired for themselves, based upon the taxpayers, to have a private security force. Psychologically, what you're seeing is somebody's own biases having a effect on the way they're looking at public policy without recognizing its ramification and who it's going to hurt.
All right, we're going to get right to it. We have breaking news out of Minneapolis at this hour, where Minneapolis City Council members at a rally about an hour ago have announced their plan to disband the Minneapolis Police Department. Andy McDonald was at the community event at Powderhorn Park where they made that announcement and joins us live. Andy, what do you know?
Hey, thank you, Chris. Well, their main message here was to invest in the community and not the police. About 1,000 people were here at Powderhorn Park, many still present here on this side of the slope as they watched Minneapolis City Council member, a majority of them, vote in favor of removing Minneapolis police and replacing them with community-based public safety. The sign in front of the stage stated their motive to defund police. City Council President Lisa Bender said their efforts to reform have, quote, failed. The officials say they are looking to other ways to maintain public safety in their communities and are starting a conversation on how to move forward together.
Our commitment is to do what's necessary to keep every single member of our community safe and to tell the truth that the Minneapolis police are not doing that. Our commitment is to end our city's toxic relationship with the Minneapolis Police Department, to end policing as we know it, and to recreate systems of public safety that actually keep us safe.
Create systems of public safety that actually keep us safe. I want to know where we're getting these magical people from. Where these magical people are going to come who are just going to keep us safe. Because we're utilizing a system that doesn't work on purpose. And we just have to fix it by finding these magical people. In another interview, Lisa Bender talks about sending mental health professionals for calls for people who are having mental health issues. And I can actually speak to this pretty bluntly because I used to do it. I worked on a mobile crisis team for a few years. And we used to go out with police. Now, I can honestly tell you, not every police officer was good for these calls. And it was actually good that we were there. And I would absolutely love for mental health professionals to be on police forces to deal with mental health issues. It would be very helpful. But to send only mental health professionals into situations like that by themselves is incredibly dangerous. And bad things will take place. And I could tell you that from personal experience and seeing it. Having the ability for police officers to be close by in case things get out of hand was a good thing. Mental health professionals are not trained for that. They're trained to help with this situation. The same thing, by the way, on a hospital floor. On a hospital floor in any mental health facility, you have the trained professionals, but you also have security. And you have people to help if a patient becomes out of control. And even if they're going to shoot up the patient with something to give them a sedative, it normally takes individuals to hold the person down to even give them and be able to administer that drug. So this notion that we're just going to be able to send mental health professionals out there and they're magically going to help people in these situations is not good and is not reality. There's a lack of understanding about how these systems work. And I'm not sure if it's coming just about ignorance or because of political expediency. I don't know the motivation. But I can say to you, they're not really thinking this out in any way, shape, or form. This is actually going to lead to more death. As we see here, very quickly, what happened in famous Chop.
Breaking news in the so-called Capitol Hill organized protest zone. There's been yet another shooting. Early this morning, protesters finished a march back to Cal Anderson Park when they say gunshots were fired nearby. You could hear it on the live stream there. Several protesters were streaming it live at the time, but the supposed gunfire did not stop there. We have team coverage this morning on this breaking news. First King 5, Kayla Lafferty joining us now live in the CHOP zone, or just on the outskirts of it safely. Kayla, what are you learning? It looks like the SUV is now behind you.
Yeah, so that is the big thing that's here right now. You can see that white Jeep that we've been reporting on all morning long is still here on scene. One of the big things we're noticing, there are a lot of bullet holes in this car. There's still some medical supplies on scene as well on the other end. The bumper is ripped off the car. It has been taped off by some of the members of CHOP this morning, but most of the information that we did learn was from those live streams that we mentioned. From Converge Media in particular, they talked to some protesters from CHOP who say the white Jeep drove through Cal Anderson and toward one of the barricades. At some point there were shots fired, and Omari Salisbury with Converge Media reports that CHOP security shot at those people in the Jeep after they ran into the barricades here. And we can see in the video, of course, and as we just showed you, there are bullet holes, the windows are broken out, the bumper is ripped off there. People on scene say some of the protesters within CHOP pulled two people with gunshot wounds out of that Jeep and rendered aid to them. And this wasn't the first report of gunfire over last night at about 1:15. There were loud bangs as well that went off at 11th and Olive. Some people at first thought they were fireworks, and people later thought that they were gunshots. And then the confirmed shooting, of course, happened at 3 a.m. And here's a clip from Converge Media's live stream just after the shooting, breaking down what they say happened.
This vehicle right here was driving around the neighborhood and did a drive-by shooting, and then came through and crashed through the barricade. That would be the southern barricade, the one that borders Pike Street. When the vehicle came through and crashed through the barricade, the vehicle was met by force.
And you hear him say there that vehicle was met by force, and we do have a live look, of course, again, of that vehicle where you can see.
And there we have it. Because when you don't have police officers, everything goes well and nothing's a problem. And it's only the police that are the issue. If we just take care of that problem, we'll stop rapes in this country. And if we get rid of the police, we'll take care of all crime. And if we just invest in systems, crime goes away. Because that's how it works. And this magical thinking is very scary, because these are people who are in positions of power. And in their power, they're making decisions and thought processes without understanding its ramifications, who it's going to hurt. And sadly, the people that generally get hurt the most are the people that have the least amount of resources to protect themselves. And that's normally how these things work. The one most beautiful thing about having a society is that we create systems where we hold people accountable. And when you break it down into anarchy, you have it less and less that the system's able to help people. This is not those saying that the systems are perfect, because they're not. And not to saying there aren't problems in the system that need to be worked on. They exist, and they do. But the solution is not destroying the systems. The solution is creating the ability to fix systems as best as you can. Will it ever be perfect? No. We are dealing with human beings. When you have human beings, we are imperfect people, which means we will have imperfections in our systems. But to then state that we're going to be able to fix it is part of the problem. Pol Pot and Joseph Stalin tried to create perfect systems, and we see how many deaths that led to. This is not a mindset that you like to have. The one thing I love within our Constitution on 4th of July is we are creating a more perfect union. People make fun of that because they say, look, how silly they were with their grammar. But I think it's absolutely appropriate, because it is the idea that we look for more perfection, which is the idea that we're not perfect and we never will be. But we try to make things better. The one thing beautiful about our society is that we can stand up and say, this is what we disagree with. This is wrong. And when we have that ability, that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful power that every individual has, where I can sit up on a YouTube channel and say, that's wrong. I don't agree with that. And you have the ability to hear me and say to me why you think I'm wrong. That is a beautiful freedom that not everybody gets in every other country. There are places that you can get arrested when you don't do that, when you express yourself in certain ways. I think people confuse the idea of expression with the idea there's never a consequence, because there are consequences to expressing your ideas. But your freedom from the government is what we protect in this country. I'd love to see more protection, actually, than less, where people were protected to be able to state their ideas no matter what was the situation without recourse or punishment. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. We should have the right to disagree. We should have the right to have discourse. We should have that right. That is a beautiful thing. But when we start coming up with our own ideas without understanding its ramification and saying, let's do something that will only cause more problems and more hurt, that's problematic. The Second Amendment of the United States is not going away. People are going to have a right to bear arms. That's in the federal Constitution. Which means that whatever your force is has to be able to deal with the possibility that you're coming about onto somebody who could be armed. The idea of having a force, a civil force, without armament puts yourself at a very big disadvantage in dealing with any situation. And it's something to think about. And like I said, a law of unintended consequence. I hope again that you like this video if you like it. I hope that if you disagree with me, you'll tell me why. And I'd love to hear your opinion about it. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. And if you'd like to become a patron to this, please go to the link below on Subcribe-star and hit the link. I thank you very much. Have a good night, good mental health, and a happy 4th of July.